Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being a part of a marathon experience in terms of the Energy Forum on day one. We really put it to you at COP, but I'm excited to continue the conversation for one last go here as we talk through what inevitably was going to be one of the mainstay features of the Emirati COP, right? We're in the Middle East, it's an oil-producing country, and that brought immediate perspective and focus on that issue in the context of the Emiratis hosting this. So I'm excited to have a conversation today about oil and gas as a net zero imperative. And I'm joined for that conversation with Mike Avery, President and General Manager of 1.5, Toby Rice, the CEO of EQT, and Lorenzo Simonelli, who is the CEO of Baker Hughes. Gentlemen, great to have you here with us. So already this week, we're on the cusp of wrapping up the first week of COP, and some big announcements in terms of the oil and gas space. Toby, maybe, I think the community here has a sense of where the energy agenda is going, smart on energy, but maybe you can frame it a little bit in terms of what you've seen happen so far and why it matters.
Yeah. Check. Great. I think you're seeing it today. You're seeing it here at this conference. I think it's really important that when you're talking about climate, you're talking about energy. And it's really important to have the individuals and the companies in the industry that is responsible for over 80% of the world's energy here at this conference talking about climate solutions. For us to be included is really important because we have some really amazing solutions to offer the world. And when you look at what's happening in this world today, we've seen rampant inflation, cost of living is being challenged all across the world. We're seeing emissions skyrocket. And we're seeing energy poverty shrinking. And for the first time in the last 20 years, the number of people in this world living without electricity increased. Clearly, what we're doing is not working. And I think that's common for all of us. We need to be doing a lot more. And I think one of the things that we should be thinking about is, how do we get to this spot? It's not just about doing more solar, more wind. We're investing more in that now than we have in traditional energy. That can't be the only solution. And I think that what we need to be doing is not just thinking about what we can do to lower emissions within our borders as countries. We need to be asking bigger questions. What can we be doing to lower emissions outside of our borders? And that's really where some amazing solutions exist. And our solution for our country, when we asked ourselves this question in America, what can we do to lower emissions outside of our borders? It starts by identifying the biggest source of emissions on this planet, which is foreign coal, and providing a better solution. And our energy transition plan starts by unleashing U.S. LNG to replace foreign coal. And we have the capabilities right now as America's largest natural gas producer. We're very passionate about this. We are the world's largest LNG exporter, talking about the United States. We have the ability to quadruple that. And doing so is going to be one of the biggest green initiatives on the planet. It's also going to provide a Saudi Arabia worth of clean energy to the world stage. It's going to provide a tremendous amount of energy security as well. But in order to make that happen, we've got to change people's perspectives. They've got to understand that the infrastructure it takes to do this is incredibly important. That's the first phase, is transitioning the world from coal to gas. We have another phase after that, and that's transitioning gas to a zero carbon energy solution. And the companies up here are going to be key in providing the technology that allows us to make that happen. But it's really important for people to know we hear the demand for cleaner energy, and we're taking bold steps in our industry to make that happen.
So Lorenzo, Sir Alok Sharma, who ran COP26 in the UK, kicked off the conversation today talking about the need to see a 40% decrease in emissions by 2040, and put a really big charge to the oil and gas space and the discussions around the global stocktake and the disposition of fossil energy into the future. I know you've been on a journey, Baker Hughes has been a part of the journey with the COP28 presidency in terms of creating some of their signature initiatives. Can you talk about the significance of the Oil and Gas Decarbonization Charter and what you're seeing come out of this COP from the perspective of industry?
So great to be here, and also with my esteemed panel as well. And I think the GDA is a great step forward. And I think as you look at the about 50 companies that signed up, it's a reflection of the commitment towards reducing emissions that are there within the operations of oil and gas and the production of energy. I also think that this is very doable, because when you look at the ability to stopping flaring, looking at methane, when you think of the operations efficiency, there are technologies that exist today that enable us to reduce emissions. At Baker Hughes, we're an energy technology company. What we do is we enable, through technology, the roadmap towards a lower carbon economy. We ourselves made a net pledge of net zero in 2019. Since our 2019 baseline for Scope 1 and Scope 2, we've reduced 28%. Now, take that a step further. If you think about just what's been said by the IEA, a 10% efficiency in the operations of oil and gas is going to reduce 0.5 gigatons of CO2 and greenhouse gas emissions. So there's a lot that can be done with the upgrades and the technology that's available today, at the same time as we're continuing to move forward with advances in technology. And going back to what Toby said, because I think it's often misunderstood as well, the simple act of moving from coal to gas has been a huge enabler for the way in which the United States and Europe both reduced their emissions. Why has European emissions gone up? A large portion of that is because there's been an increase in coal usage again during the course of last year for the unfortunate events of the conflict. And again, if we look at the US, as it continues to progress on gas, it continues to extend its reduction in emissions. So we've got to look at the practical solutions that are available today and actually implement them and continue driving forward towards the net zero pledge.
But, you know, clearly there's been a lot of scrutiny from the climate community in terms of the role of oil and gas and the ability to actually make and marshal progress here. So, Mike, I'm curious, is Scope 1, Scope 2, 2050, near zero methane 2030, they're actually quite transformative from a perspective of many of the companies, the national oil companies that have joined in particular this pledge. Is that enough to show progress? And if not, what do we need to do now to maintain and demonstrate from an industry perspective that this really is sustainable and durable?
Yes. Yeah, look, I think there's some really important building blocks being put in place that you know, we've seen particularly today and through some of the other days here at COP. It's important because these are, you know, new targets that are being set that are going to need a lot of communication. This is fundamentally a communication issue about what the oil and gas sector can do to contribute toward achieving these. They are really important. But I think there's an element of trust here that's going to have to be developed as well. You know, it's right that companies are going to be held accountable by many, observing, you know, how that progress takes place. And so not only communication, but building trust as we go here, taking those steps, and making sure that we meet those interim steps, I think is going to go a long way to showing that, you know, this really is achievable, because it's really, really important.
So, Mike, if I could keep with you for 1 minute, just thinking through the technology you're deploying and helping create the enabling environment for this. 1.5 is pioneering the direct air capture conversation in CCS. Is this the type of technology, is this the type of conversation that you expect to be driven further in the context of the climate narrative and future COPs? Are we going to see this this community and I think one of our prior panels talked about uniting, acting, and delivering. Is this a new platform, both in terms of the context of the OGDA or Oil and Gas Decarbonization Charter, but also this ecosystem that's being created here in the climate discussion?
Yeah, look, I think it's fundamentally linked. You know, if I can use one sort of case study, so direct air capture is a technology that we're focused on pretty heavily here. And there's multiple uses for the CO2 that we capture from the atmosphere. And ultimately you have a product which can move onto the market, and that helps place a price on carbon. Now, if you play that back upstream, when you build something like a direct air capture facility, you've got to do a very comprehensive life cycle analysis, which includes all the inputs into that process. One of the feedstocks for the direct air capture plant for one of the processes is natural gas. And so you can play that up through the natural gas stream, where you can now justify economically, in addition to just doing the right thing, the business case behind tackling some of these methane issues that need to be addressed. So I think it's important that whether it's direct air capture or some other technology in the sector that's being deployed, having some fundamental core link between the two that ultimately drives business decisions is what's going to accelerate this. And so I think it's absolutely applicable to multiple technologies.
Toby, we're talking about gas and taking it, as an energy conversation with energy producers and service and technology providers, taking it as a key element here. But we are in Dubai at the climate conference, and I think it's important that we just ask directly, why do we need gas in the system? We've seen 3x renewable energy, we've seen 3x nuclear energy, but you obviously have a very different vision. Why do we need that vision, and then why and how can we ensure it's durable for the climate future?
Yeah, that's actually probably one of the most important questions I think people should be asking. And we get this question a lot. They say, Tobe, you want to unleash US LNG, the emission reduction benefits of coal, or I think everybody agrees that would be the most impactful thing that we can do. Obviously, energy security brings to the world, nobody questions that. But their question is, we've got solar, we've got wind, why do we need natural gas? And I think that question rises because not a lot of people understand how much energy demand there is in this world. And I can't blame people for not knowing that. I can't wrap my head around how much energy demand there is. But the reality is, when solar and wind cannot meet the energy demand of the world is going to turn to coal. It's that simple. And in the last 12 months, despite the historic spending amounts, despite the conviction, despite the commitments, solar and wind's inability to meet the world demand for coal has caused coal-based emissions to skyrocket over 500 million tons. Now, to put that into perspective, that amount of emissions essentially wipes out every single environmental benefit that we've gained in the United States from our solar and wind installations. Think about that. 12 months of not addressing foreign coal has wiped out 15 years of one of the richest nations' heavy, aggressive investments into solar and wind. Now, what does that tell you? It tells you that foreign coal is a heavyweight problem, and it requires a heavyweight solution. That's us. Natural gas is that heavyweight solution, and we've got the capabilities to do this, but we do have to address the world's concern about methane, because that is a really important question. And there's a lot of people concerned about methane, and I'll tell you guys what I told Secretary Granholm 24 months ago. You're concerned about methane emissions, good. Keep the focus there. Keep the bullseye on methane emissions, because we're going to knock it out of the park. Like Lorenzo says, we've got technology that we can apply. And as an example, what we've done at EQT, again, America's largest natural gas producer, we've done a very simple initiative. It took a lot of work, but it was incredibly impactful. Our pneumatic device replacement program, we know where these emissions are coming from. We have technology that we can replace it with. And we've overhauled over 9,000 of these devices, replaced every single one across our over 2,500 locations, producing the energy equivalent of about 1 million barrels a day. It was incredibly impactful. We dropped our methane emissions from this one initiative over 70%, reducing emissions over 300,000 tons. We did it quickly, in less than 18 months. We did it cost effectively, most importantly. Equally as important, let's put it that way. For a cost of less than $30 million. It's the carbon abatement costs, less than $10 a ton. We got it done for $6 a ton. So addressing methane emissions is something that we're putting a focus on, and we're going to knock it out of the park. We're going to do big, impactful initiatives that are going to be done fast, and they're going to be done cost effectively. And the last thing we're going to do is we're going to bring it a little bit more transparency. We do a lot of great things. Quite frankly, we do a pretty terrible job at communicating all the great stuff we do. We're bringing radical transparency to our business. The gas certifications that you guys will see all the gas producers enabling now is the third-party environmental audits on our business to prove that what we say is happening is actually happening. We're not just looking at our locations, we're actually expanding that to now reporting on every acre. In Appalachia, we've established a Appalachian Methane Initiative. we're going to be doing aerial surveys across the entire basin. Now, you may not know how big Appalachia is, but we're going to be monitoring an area equivalent to the size of France. We take this incredibly seriously. And then lastly, we can do a great job on the upstream controlling our methane emissions, but what about when that travels through the pipelines, ultimately down to the consumer? And on that end, we are bringing in a company called Context Labs, working in collaboration with other industry leaders in America that are going to provide a full cycle carbon intensity score to give confidence to the customers that the performance is there from the wellhead through the pipes to the end consumer. We think that type of robust action and radical transparency and action is going to make a difference and show the world that we can knock methane emissions out and focus on the emission reduction benefits when people use our product.
So Lorenzo, I want to key in on this this conversation around technology because I think it's important, particularly in the context of methane. I'm sure you make as many flights to the region as I do, and one of the moments that I know that I'm around the Middle East is when we fly over Basra and you see a bunch of flares. So there are a lot of companies like EQT that are taking a very serious stance in terms of addressing their methane emissions. But even the last COP was in Egypt. It's a place that has oil and gas production, and they were laggards maybe in even actioning some of the methane abatement technology and deployment that I'd like to see, not the least, looking north of this region and looking at Basra. Why are we having success in deploying technology in some locations? And what do you need to see as an enabling environment for the technology to address the challenges that the industry is facing in other locations?
As you've seen in the deployment of technologies in the past, it isn't always just the technology. It's the fundamental ecosystem coming together between policy, financing, end users, and you highlighted Basra. We have one of the largest flare gas recovery projects taking place in Iraq at the moment. And there's the opportunity in Egypt. When we were at COP27 at Sharm el-Sheikh, again, that was introduced. There's other countries as well. There's a commitment towards it, but you do need an aspect of, first of all, monetizing also the gas that's recovered. There's an aspect of the policies. There's the framework that needs to be in place. And some of that is also best practices and lessons learned from other nations. And I think the more dialogue we have and the more pragmatism we have, and it comes to also helping each other. Because it's easy to say, okay, stop flaring. But if the country has no use for the gas, you've got to give them then a monetization route for the gas when it's recovered through a third party. And these are mechanisms that need to be established, and they're mechanisms that we're discussing. It's getting late in the day and the microphones are dying on us. But I think, again, it's a question of really the ecosystem of everybody coming together. But the technology is not the impediment. It's the ability to listen to each other and get the frameworks in place.
Just a follow-up question on this. A lot of the dialogue this year, we watched the climate and energy discussion and those pillars become really homogenized. Or you can't talk about climate without talking about energy and vice versa now. And I think finance is a big component of that. In the discussions and the road to COP28, a lot of discussion around transition finance, that this isn't polar and that we can't be absolute about the policies that we're putting in place. To achieve this methane vision, do you see a future where we can actually allow big investment institutions to be able to provide the capital to go behind gas system architecture and the apparatus necessary to actually achieve gas capture?
I think you're going to have to, at some stage, have a real pragmatic discussion on how you move the needle. And I think the realization that it's not just black and white, but to make the milestones and make the journey, energy transition means there is a transition of time. And I think we've got to all approach it towards a pledge of getting to abatement, to net zero, and how we get there through the milestones and the technology, the finances that are required, and also the regional approaches that are required. It will not be a consistent journey for all unless we just want chaos. It is going to be different, and everybody's going to have to approach it differently based on the circumstances that we're in. As a company, we focus on the technology side, but we are very much focusing also on the ecosystem coming together on a regional approach.
You know, Mike, 6 companies this week put in direct funding to support the World Bank Methane Fund. So they're going above and beyond their books and saying, not only are we going to clean up the system that we have, we also see an imperative because of methane to make sure that we deal with the global system and maybe some people that don't have the same either political or financial capacity to do that. What's your perspective in terms of what's driving that? Is it, everybody's striving for the cleanest barrel of oil or the cleanest molecule of gas? Are you being judged by the production in your value chain, or is it really being judged by the aggregate body of the oil and gas sector globally? What can we do to get those other countries and companies moving?
Yeah, I think it's healthy to see joint effort come together on this, and especially at scale. If to use a term that we sometimes quote, skate to where the puck is going. I think that many of us look forward in time. We anticipate that there is going to be measurement on carbon intensity for the products that we make. And so, if you look forward not that far in time, putting in joint effort and realizing that this is going to take a combined, coming together of minds to solve this, it's really encouraging to see that come together.
Toby, I really want a tough issue here. Dave Turk, the Deputy Secretary of Energy, you mentioned Granholm, and Sir Alok Sharma both talked about Scope 3. It was a starting point of the conversation. And I think it's important just to take it head on. Maybe there's not commonality in how to address this right now, but what is the right perspective of how industry is thinking about this and how these climate conversations are impacting that view?
Yeah, I'm all for advancing the scopes. I think let's knock out scope 1 and 2 first, and then let's talk about what we can do next. I mean, at EQT, we're going to be net zero on scope 1 and 2 emissions by 2025. So I think as America's largest natural gas producer, if we can do it, others can do it, and we'll be leaving a trail of breadcrumbs to help others along the way. But I don't think the conversation is scope 3. I think we need to be talking about scope 4, which is not the emissions associated with using the product. It's the emissions of reductions benefits when people use your product. So for us, putting out more natural gas into this world, you could look at natural gas being converted into power generation as a 30 million or a 20 million ton scope 3 emissions carbon footprint. But if that natural gas replaces an equivalent amount of coal, 50 million tons of power gen from coal, we've saved the world over 30 million tons of emissions. So I think it's really important for us to look at everything that we do holistically, because it's not just one country, this whole thing is connected. And yeah, at the end of the day, taking a holistic approach, getting on a scope 4 footprint would be really, really impactful. And listen, I think if we get to a place where we've replaced all the coal and there's no more coal, there's no more environmental emissions reductions from natural gas, and there's better alternatives, then replace the natural gas. But just understand, not only are we launching the most LNG to the world to replace coal, we're also working on taking our carbon footprint to zero and transitioning gas to a zero carbon energy solution, whether that's from hydrogen or what we're really excited about is with carbon capture. One of the biggest things that's been missing from the carbon capture space, because this has been around for a long time, but we've never really had the incentives that we needed to think about sticking the CO2 underground. All that changed with IRA. We've got really good incentives with the 45Q now that motivate us to want to stick the CO2 underground. We've now got technology that Lorenzo's working that is going to solve the next biggest part of carbon capture, which ironically in this world, getting a pure stream of CO2 is a really hard thing to do. And currently to get that, you're paying carbon capture technologies $100 to $200 a ton to scrub the tailpipe of a power plant to get a pure stream of CO2 that you could then stick underground. Those solutions right now are dead on arrival when your value of CO2 is only $85 a ton. The technology that's being developed right now is going to give us a pure stream of CO2 as a byproduct, and things like you're doing with DAC is going to give us that byproduct. And now the question is, can you stick that underground for less than $85 a ton? The answer is yes. And it's even more exciting to know that, yeah, there's going to be a lot of exploration. Where do we stick it? We're going to have a lot of new reservoirs that we look at putting it, but keep this in mind. We already have existing assets connected underground that have been, that are connected to reservoirs that have proven the effective ability to store fluids underground for millions of years. That fluid is oil and gas that was trapped that we've been able to pull out. And those can be those assets that we can use to get a jump start on carbon capture immediately and using our existing depleted assets to store CO2. So I'm excited about us leading the carbon economy, and then solutions like DAC will be very much easier for them to plug into an already established ecosystem. Again, there's so many great things that we can do with natural gas to set the table for really even more amazing future opportunities.
So, Lorenzo, we're running out of time here, and I want to provide you one more opportunity. Obviously, Mike and Toby have been pretty optimistic about the future of technology in this mix. We covered methane with you earlier. Are there other technologies that we should be thinking about as we move forward that you want to see at the forefront of the conversation?
Look, I think you can break them down into a couple of areas. First of all, CCUS is not just the oil and gas industry, but it is across multiple industries that can really take their emissions and we can store them, and we can also do something with the CO2 because the circular economy is just around the corner and there are uses for the CO2. The next area is really also as a byproduct of having pure CO2, new technologies such as net power, which obviously Toby knows well, produces 300 megawatts of clean power and also produces a stream of 97% pure CO2. Huge opportunities there. As you go forward, direct air capture, similarly what's already been said, but also as you think of direct air capture, it's going to be necessary for multiple industries to be able to capture from the air, either, again, utilize the CO2, capture it, sequester it, but that's going to be big. And ultimately, hydrogen. Hydrogen is a valuable molecule. And I think what we've got to remember is it's an and, not an or. We've got to continue to extend the energy mix and continue to widen it with all of the areas because the world needs energy, clean energy. And if there's one thing we know, the world has benefited from the ability to provide energy, and it's brought more people out of poverty than anything else. And as we look at population increasing, I think there's a statistic that says also we've had more people that have had less energy than we've had in the past last year. We've got to see that reversed again, and that's going to be by having abundance of multiple forms of energy, renewables, hydro, hydrogen, nuclear, natural gas, and let's keep on going towards emissions-friendly and clean energy sources.
Well, I think it's fair to say we'll see you all back at COP29, but preferably also at the Global Energy Forum. I really appreciate the time you've taken to think through these issues and bring industry's perspective to the forefront as we drive towards inclusivity and change. So I appreciate your being in the panel. That wraps our Global Energy Forum Day 1. We thank everybody for being here, both in person and online, and would look forward to seeing you all on December 7th at the Global Energy Forum at the St. Regis on the Palm, where we'll be pulling together another set of dynamic conversations. Thank you.